Hi, I'm Martin Zuris, and we're going to do a series about the war in Israel. But before we do that, a brief history of the land, State of Israel, Palestine, is needed because evidently a lot of people don't know the history of the land at all, or just bits and pieces. So let's start Palestine, okay? So where does the word Palestine come from? So the word Palestine and Palestinians come from the time of the reign of Roman Caesar Hadrian. So that's where the word Palestine comes from. When the Jews that lived in the province of Judea, a Roman province of Judea, revolted. It was called the Bar Kokhba revolt, and it was sometime ended at 135 of our Common Era, and started a couple of years before that. And when the Jewish rebellion was defeated, Hadrian renamed Judea, Syria, Palestina, just to spite the Jews and to disconnect the land from the Jewish people. And Palestina was the Latin word for the arch enemies, ancient arch enemies that didn't exist anymore at the time, the Philistines. So that's where the word comes from. Then Syria, Palestina, Syria got dropped, and Palestina, Palestine. That's where the word comes from. So any people that lived in that area then later were called Palestinians, which were mainly Arabs and Jews. Mainly Jews, and then the Arab conquest in the 600s is when the Arabs moved in. But Hadrian also renamed Jerusalem, which he destroyed, and it was destroyed 70 AD during another revolt of the Jewish people against the Roman Empire. Renamed the city Aelia Capitolina, and on the Temple Mount, when where used to stand the Second Temple, Jewish Second Temple, which was destroyed in 70 AD, he built a temple for Jupiter. So that's where the word Palestine and Palestinians come from. So there really are no Palestinian people. It is different people living in a land that was renamed by one person, a Roman Emperor, Hadrian. But let's go even further in history. So whose land is it? Who's got a claim to the land? So the Jewish presence goes back about 4,000 years, when Abraham moved in from the east, and who's the father of nations. And of course, he's the patriarch of the Jewish people through Isaac, and the Arabs through Ishmael. So Abraham came into the land. That's where the Jewish people come from. They were there until they left for Egypt. And in Egypt, they were in slavery for 400 years. Not in the beginning, but then they were in Egypt for 400 years, most of the time then slaves. And the Exodus, when they moved back into the Promised Land, the land, Judea, what became later, and then Palestine later, Jews returned to the land, the Levant, the whole area called as well. So that's about 3,500 years ago. Since then, for 3,500 years, the Jewish people have a constant presence in the land. So they had two kingdoms, the 12 tribes of Israel. They had the northern kingdom of Israel. They had the southern kingdom of Judea. And ever since, there were several conquests of the land. Speaking of the Babylonians, the Syrians, and during the Babylonians, Jews were taken to exile again for 70 years. Then they returned, built a second temple, and the northern kingdom never recovered, but had the Judea, the southern kingdom. So, and Jerusalem was the capital of the Jewish kingdom. So the Romans then, when the Romans conquered Judea, that they put Herod as a king of Judean province. We all heard of Herod, the great builder. Expanded the second temple, did a lot of buildings, Herodium and Caesarea, and did all kinds of very, till today, great buildings. Even one Jewish archaeologist said that he was a crazy builder. Where there was a hill, he leveled it. Where there was no hill, he built it. So we have a lot of archaeological evidence of that time. So, but the Romans ruled Judea before 70, a couple of years before the year 70, is when the Jews revolted against the Roman Empire. And at the time, Nero was a Caesar, and he sent one of his generals, Vespasian, to suppress the revolt. He pretty much suppressed the revolt in the north. Jerusalem was still holding off the Romans. Vespasian went back to Rome and appointed his son Titus to finish it off. Vespasian became Caesar, and Titus defeated Jerusalem, leveled it, killed tons of the inhabitants, and destroyed the second temple. You can see historical evidence of this when you go to Rome, and you go from the Colosseum, you go to the Roman Forum, and you see the arch, the Victory Arch of Titus. And when you go underneath it and you look above, you see a depiction of the conquering of Jerusalem and destroying of the temple, where they're carrying all the treasures from the temple, the golden menorah and a bunch of other things from the temple. So that history is even in stone. So after the Roman Empire split in half during Constantine came as a Roman emperor. He moved the capital from Rome to Constantinople that he built. Then eventually the Roman Empire split in half, and the eastern part with Constantinople became the Byzantine Empire, and the Byzantines controlled the land. And every conqueror that came through the land always killed Jews and expelled Jews, but Jews always stay there, always a continuous presence for 3,500 years. So after the Byzantines, the Byzantine Empire fell to the Turks. Then you had the Mamelukes come through Judea, and you had the Arabs that came after the death of Muhammad in the 600s. They conquered Judea, which was at the time was called already Palestine. And that's again, Jews were expelled, their land stolen from them, and that's how the majority of the Arabs at that time and subsequently came into the land. Then we have the Ottoman Empire conquered the land, and the Ottoman Empire controlled the land, and again you had Jews and Arabs living there. At the time, was not too many people living there. It was a desert. Even Mark Twain, when he visited the land in, I believe it was 1867, he wrote a book about it, that it's a desert, pretty much nobody's there. You can walk for a day, not meet a person. And so wasn't that many people there, but you had some Jewish people and Arab people living there. But nobody really, besides the Jews, had interest in it, and the Jews were not allowed to. They were dispersed mainly during the Roman occupation. The Jews were dispersed throughout the world, and then during the Arab conquest, the 600s, Jews were displaced and their land taken. So after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire fell apart, so you had a Balfour, it's called Balfour Declaration, 1917, which Great Britain, named after Balfour, was an agreement between that it was going to be between the Jewish representation and King Faisal, Arab representation. How the land's going to be split over there in the Middle East, and that what's called Palestine, that the Jewish people are going to have their own homeland, their own state there in Palestine, in their historical homeland. And so that was 1917. Then it was confirmed with the Treaty of Sèvres. Then you had a Treaty of San Remo. It was all confirmed that by the powers, the winning powers, World War I, that the Jewish people are going to have a home there, and the Arab people too. So it was the Palestinian Jews and Palestinian Arabs. So there really are no Palestinians. And what happened was, so after the defeat of the Ottoman Empire in First World War, the only thing that the Turks had remained was what's today Turkey. And the rest of the land, all the way south, was divided by mandate. The French had the north, and from ancient Judea, and Great Britain had it was called a mandate for British Mandate of Palestine. So, and that's where all these countries then, the French and the British just took the map and created all these countries that we know as Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, all these, Jordan, all these countries were created by Great Britain and France. So artificially. And in 1921, what happened? So the whole British Mandate of Palestine encompassed what today is the West Bank, Gaza, which West Bank is called because west of the Jordan River. Historically, it's Judea and Samaria, and Jordan. That was the British Mandate of Palestine. And that was supposed to be split between the Palestinian Arabs and the Palestinian Jews. And Jews were supposed to get pretty much their ancestral homeland going back during the Roman Empire and before the Roman Empire. They were supposed to get that. So what they were supposed to have is what today is Israel, and also east of the Jordan River, which is part of what today is Jordan. Well, what happened was that against all agreements, Winston Churchill, in 1921, I believe it was in 1921, he pretty much gave almost 80% of the British Mandate of Palestine to the Hashemite family. That land was called Transjordan, beyond Jordan, and he gave it to the Hashemites, to the Arabs. And it was as a reward for the Arabs supporting during World War I the British Empire against the Ottoman Empire. And the Hashemite family were pushed out of, they controlled Mecca and Medina, and they were pushed out by the Ibn Saud, by the Saudi family that took over. And so Winston Churchill gave that land to the Arabs. and now we had left only a little over 20% of the land that was originally. It was less than the Jews were supposed to get as their homeland. And so then in the 30s, there was an Arab revolt because Jews were migrating back from Europe to their ancestral homeland, and the Arabs revolted, and it was a big revolt. And as a consequence of the revolt, the British Empire made it's called a white paper, a declaration, and pretty much there they reneged on everything, on the Balfour Declaration. They reneged on the Treaty of Sèvres and the conference in San Remo. They went back on it, and they said that pretty much the Balfour Declaration was fulfilled because plenty of Jews moved back into Palestine, moved back, and therefore they have their homeland, but they rejected now no state, no Jewish state. That they called that within 10 years from the 1939 White Paper that there should be a Palestinian state that should be governed by Jews and Arabs living in that land. And they limited further immigration of Jews into the land because the Arabs didn't want them there. So that's what had that was 1939, then Second World War, the Holocaust. And then in 1947, after the war, of course, after the war, Jews were trying to migrate back from Europe. Britain was the one preventing them from doing so. And in 1947, the newly created United Nations made a resolution that the remaining part of the British Mandate of Palestine should be split between Palestinian Jews and Palestinian Arabs. So originally, the whole mandate was supposed to be split, which Arabs already got almost 80%, and now again they wanted to split the remaining 20 and something percent again between Arabs and Jews. So the Jews accepted the resolution, the Arabs rejected it, and the Jewish people declared the state of Israel in 1948, and what happened, surrounding Arab states attacked Israel and the newly formed Israel. Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt just attacked Israel, and Israel prevailed in the war. However, Jordan, which it was before it was Transjordan, then it became Jordan, declared independence, and Jordan crossed the Jordan River and annexed, that's what they use the word, annexed the West Bank, what they call the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, and controlled it. And Egypt actually moved into Gaza and controlled Gaza. It's interesting that when Jordan controlled the West Bank, it was not called an occupation, and when Egypt controlled Gaza, it was not called an occupation. Then you had the 1967 Six-Day War. Again, the State of Israel fighting against surrounding Arab countries. Israel won and moved in, pushed Jordan out of the West Bank and pushed Egypt out of Gaza. Pretty much State of Israel, they were like, I think like 30 miles away from Damascus, the capital of Syria, and they were like 70 miles or something more away from Cairo. So the State of Israel took over the whole Sinai Peninsula. They were at the Suez Canal, close to Damascus, and then they pulled back under international pressure, under pressure of the United States. And they pulled back, gave Sinai back to Egypt, but kept control of the West Bank and Gaza. Then suddenly it's called an occupation. When Israel does the same thing as Jordan, Egypt did, it's an occupation. When they do it, it's not an occupation. And it really, it's not an occupation because that land technically is a land, it's a stateless land. So there is no state, no country that owns the land. Because the Arabs rejected to have their Palestinian state in 1948. Then they could have had several times, they could have had their Palestinian state. But any time that it was close, when the Palestinians were getting almost everything they wanted, 95, 97% of their demands, Arafat declared an intifada. First intifada, second intifada. So the reason is that the Palestinians, the Palestinian Arabs, they don't want a Palestinian state because then they would have to live next to the state of Israel, next to the Jews, and they don't want any Jews living in the area. They don't want a state of Israel. That's why the chant of the Palestinians is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Well, from the river, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, Palestine will be free. Free from what? Free from Jews, free from the state of Israel. So the Palestinians don't want a Palestinian state. They want a Palestinian state without the existence of the Jewish state and the whole land, which then they would have 100% of the old British Mandate of Palestine after World War I, after the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire. But the Palestinian Arabs, they already have their state. They got their state in 1921, way before the Jews, and it is called Jordan. So this is it's a brief history of 3,500 years crammed together. It's the basics of it. The other thing is the wall, okay? The Israeli wall. Why was the Israeli wall built? It was built because of the intifadas, where Palestinian Arabs were coming into Jerusalem and Jewish towns and blowing suicide bombers at a market, buses and everything. So it was a protection wall to be built to protect themselves from terrorist attacks. And Gaza, again, same thing, fence built around Gaza was again protection from, just like many countries build borders to protect from their neighbors. So that's what that is all about. So we will continue with other videos, doing updates on the ongoing war, Israel and Gaza and Hezbollah, and we're going to do some interviews as well. So stay tuned. I hope this video was educational. Until next time, thank you for watching and goodbye.